Have you ever wondered how a group of scrappy colonies took on the mightiest empire in the world and won? How did the United States of America even begin? Let's travel back in time to uncover the dramatic story of revolution, courage, and the birth of a nation. Before the Stars and Stripes, there were the 13 colonies, a patchwork of settlements stretching along the Atlantic coast. Life was a mix of opportunity and hardship. In the north, you had bustling port towns like Boston and Philadelphia, centers of trade and shipbuilding. Down south, a rural economy thrived, built on vast plantations. People came from all over Europe, seeking religious freedom, economic opportunity, or simply a fresh start. They were British subjects, but a unique identity was already starting to form, an American spirit shaped by the vast, untamed continent. For over a century, these colonies largely governed themselves, developing their own assemblies and laws, enjoying a sense of independence under the distant watch of the British Crown. But that was all about to change. The turning point came after the French and Indian War. Britain had spent a fortune defending the colonies and now looked to them to help pay off the debt. Suddenly, a wave of new taxes hit the colonists. There was the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and the Townshend Acts, taxing everything from paper to tea. But it wasn't just about the money. The real issue was a powerful principle: no taxation without representation. The colonists had no members in the British Parliament, so they argued that Parliament had no right to tax them. Protests erupted. Slogans filled the streets. Groups like the Sons of Liberty organized boycotts of British goods. The tension was building, and it was about to boil over in Boston Harbor. Imagine the scene: a moonless night in December 1773, fed up with the Tea Act, which gave a British company a monopoly on tea sales. A group of colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded 3 British ships. With quiet determination, they hoisted 342 chests of tea and dumped them into the harbor. This act of defiance, known as the Boston Tea Party, was a direct challenge to British authority. King George III was furious. In response, Britain passed a series of harsh laws the colonists called the Intolerable Acts. They closed Boston Harbor, shut down Massachusetts' government, and sent more troops. Instead of crushing the rebellion, these acts united the colonies. In 1774, delegates from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. War was no longer a distant possibility. It was looming on the horizon. Less than a year later, the shot heard round the world was fired at Lexington and Concord, sparking the American Revolutionary War. The colonies were now in open rebellion. But what were they fighting for? Were they just seeking fairer treatment as British subjects, or something more? The Second Continental Congress convened, and a brilliant Virginian lawyer named Thomas Jefferson was tasked with drafting a statement to the world. On July 4, 1776, the Congress adopted his masterpiece, the Declaration of Independence. It was a revolutionary document declaring that all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It boldly proclaimed that the 13 colonies were now free and independent states, officially, severing all ties with Great Britain. There was no turning back. The war that followed was a brutal 8-year struggle. The Continental Army, led by the steadfast General George Washington, was a ragtag force of farmers and merchants. They faced the most powerful, well-trained army in the world. The early years were bleak. The Americans suffered devastating defeats in New York and Philadelphia. They endured a brutal winter at Valley Forge, where thousands suffered from starvation and disease. Yet, they persevered. A crucial turning point came in 1777 with the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga. This stunning win convinced France that the American cause was viable, and they entered the war as a crucial ally, providing money, troops, and a powerful navy. The war also saw heroes emerge like the Marquis de Lafayette, a young French aristocrat who became one of Washington's most trusted aides. The conflict wasn't just one big battle. It was a series of campaigns fought across the continent. There was the daring crossing of the Delaware on Christmas night in 1776, leading to a surprise victory at Trenton that boosted morale when it was needed most. In the South, guerrilla warfare tactics, led by commanders like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, frustrated the British forces. All these struggles, big and small, were leading to one final decisive confrontation. By 1781, The main British army under General Cornwallis had moved to a coastal town in Virginia called Yorktown, hoping to be resupplied by the British fleet. It was a fatal mistake. This was the moment George Washington had been waiting for. In a brilliant move, he coordinated with his French allies. The French Navy, under Admiral de Grasse, blockaded Chesapeake Bay, cutting off any British escape or reinforcement by sea. Meanwhile, Washington's Continental Army, combined with thousands of French troops under General Rochambeau, marched south and surrounded Yorktown on land. The trap was set. The combined American and French forces laid siege to the British, relentlessly bombarding their positions for weeks. Pinned down with supplies dwindling and no hope of rescue, Cornwallis had no choice. On October 19, 1781, the British Army marched out and surrendered as their bands reportedly played "The World Turned D Upside Down." The fighting was effectively over. The impossible had happened. The colonies had won their independence. Winning the war was one thing. Building a nation was another. The first government under the Articles of Confederation was too weak. It couldn't raise taxes or enforce laws effectively. The young country was falling apart. So in 1787, delegates once again gathered in Philadelphia, this time to create a new framework for government. After months of intense debate, argument, and compromise, they produced an extraordinary document, the United States Constitution. It established a republic with a strong federal government, divided into three branches: the legislative, executive, and judicial, with a system of checks and balances to prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful. It was a blueprint for a government of the people, by the people, for the people. With the Constitution ratified and George Washington unanimously elected as the first president, the United States of America was officially born a new republic founded on the ideals of liberty and self-government. From colonial settlements to a revolutionary fire, from a desperate struggle for freedom to the creation of a lasting republic, the birth of the United States was a remarkable journey. It was a story forged by ordinary people who did extraordinary things, whose courage and ideas continue to shape the world today. Imagine a country turning on itself, brother fighting brother. This wasn't some distant fantasy. It was the reality of the American Civil War, a conflict that tore the United States apart and ultimately reforged it. What could possibly lead a nation to such a brutal breaking point? It wasn't just one thing. It was a perfect storm of deep-seated issues that had been simmering for decades. At the heart of it all was the institution of slavery. The Southern economy was built on the backs of enslaved people, while the industrializing North was increasingly opposed to it. This created a massive economic and moral divide. Hand in hand with this was the fierce debate over states' rights. Southern states argued they had the right to govern themselves, and even leave the Union if they felt the federal government was overstepping its bounds, particularly on the issue of slavery. This wasn't just a political disagreement. It was a fundamental clash of identities. The North and South had developed into two distinct societies, a phenomenon we call sectionalism, with different values, economies, and ways of life. When these tensions finally boiled over, the nation fractured. Into this crucible stepped one of history's most iconic figures, Abraham Lincoln. Elected in 1860, his primary goal was not initially to abolish slavery, but to preserve the Union at all costs. His leadership was a masterclass in navigating political minefields and military challenges. He was a strategic thinker, a powerful orator, and a man with an unshakable resolve to keep the nation whole. Lincoln's steady hand guided the Union through its darkest hours, inspiring soldiers and citizens alike with his vision of a unified country. The war itself was a brutal, bloody affair fought across sprawling battlefields. The Battle of Antietam in 1862 became the single bloodiest day in American history, a horrific clash that ended in a strategic Union victory. This victory gave Lincoln the political capital he needed to make a monumental move. Then came Gettysburg in 1863. Over 3 harrowing days, the Union Army decisively defeated a Confederate invasion of the North. This battle is often seen as the major turning point of the war, shattering the myth of Confederate invincibility and putting the South on the defensive for the remainder of the conflict. Following the victory at Antietam, Lincoln issued the Preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1, 1863, it went into full effect. This executive order didn't free all enslaved people overnight, but it was a revolutionary step. It declared that all enslaved individuals in the Confederate States were thenceforward and forever free. More than just a legal document, it transformed the purpose of the war. No longer was it just about preserving the Union. It was now a fight for human freedom. It also allowed African American men to enlist in the Union Army, and nearly 200,000 would serve, fighting bravely for their own liberation. After years of relentless fighting, the Confederacy's resources were exhausted. In April 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Union General Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, effectively ending the war. The nation began to celebrate the hard-won peace and the reunification of the country. But just days later, tragedy struck. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by a Confederate sympathizer, a shocking act that plunged the nation back into mourning and uncertainty. The end of the war ushered in the era of Reconstruction. This was a complex and often turbulent period aimed at rebuilding the South and integrating nearly 4 million newly freed African Americans into society. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution were passed, formally abolishing slavery, granting citizenship, and giving black men the right to vote. While the path to true equality would be long and fraught with immense challenges, the Civil War had fundamentally remade the United States. It settled the question of secession, solidified the power of the federal government, and most importantly, set in motion the long journey toward freedom and justice for all. The Civil War was America's greatest trial, a painful but necessary chapter that redefined what it means to be a United States. How did a nation, born from revolution, transform into the world's leading superpower in less than 2 centuries? It's a story of ambition, innovation, and conflict that reshaped the entire globe. Let's rewind the clock and uncover the pivotal moments that forged the American empire. It all started with a spark, the Industrial Revolution. In the late 19th century, America wasn't just building. It was exploding with ingenuity. Railroads stitched the vast country together. Factories churned out steel and textiles. And inventors like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell lit up the world and connected it in ways never before imagined. This wasn't just economic growth. It was the foundation of a new kind of power, a power built on production and innovation. America was becoming the world's workshop. But power rarely stays within its own borders. In 1898, the Spanish-American War erupted. It was a short, decisive conflict, but its consequences were immense. With victory came new territories, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. For the first time, America had an overseas empire. The Monroe Doctrine, which had long declared the Americas off-limits to European colonization, now had the naval muscle to back it up. The United States stepped onto the world stage, no longer just a regional player but a global one. Then came the crucible of the 20th century, the World Wars. When World War I broke out, America initially stayed neutral. But its entry in 1917 tipped the scales, showcasing its growing military and industrial might. President Woodrow Wilson championed a new vision for global peace with his 14 points. Although the U.S. ultimately didn't join the League of Nations, the message was clear. America had a say in how the world was run. 2 decades later, the world plunged into darkness again with World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor thrust America into the conflict, galvanizing the nation. Its industrial capacity became the arsenal of democracy, supplying the Allies with the tools to win the war. By 1945, with Europe and Asia in ruins, America stood almost untouched, its economy booming and its military unparalleled. This wasn't just a victory. It was a fundamental shift in global power. In the aftermath of the war, the United States took the lead in building a new world order. It was instrumental in creating the United Nations, an organization designed to prevent future conflicts. But this new era also began with a terrifying flash. The development and use of the atomic bomb ushered in the nuclear age, giving America a weapon of unimaginable power and changing the very nature of warfare and diplomacy forever. With the old empires crumbling, a new rivalry emerged. The United States, championing capitalism and democracy, found itself facing off against the Soviet Union and its communist ideology. The Iron Curtain descended across Europe and the Cold War began. This wasn't a traditional war of armies clashing on a battlefield, but a global struggle for influence, fought through proxy wars, an arms race, and a battle for the hearts and minds of people worldwide. America had completed its transformation. It was no longer just a major power. It was one of 2 superpowers shaping the destiny of the entire planet. Video opens with a montage of iconic American imagery, Statue of Liberty, A 1950s suburban home, a bustling Wall Street, a civil rights march, a modern tech startup office. Close in parenthesis. Is the American dream a timeless promise or a fading myth? We've all heard it. The idea that anyone, regardless of their background, can achieve success through hard work. But what does that really mean, and has it ever truly been available to everyone? Let's take a journey through time to find out. The story often begins with waves of immigration. People from all over the world saw America as a beacon of hope, a melting pot where different cultures could blend and thrive. They arrived at Ellis Island, chasing the promise of a better life, believing that sheer determination could build a future from nothing. This powerful narrative cemented the dream into the nation's identity, but that dream was brutally tested. The Great Depression of the 1930s plunged the country into despair. Suddenly, hard work wasn't enough. Millions lost their jobs, homes, and savings. The iconic images of breadlines and Dust Bowl migrants tell a story of struggle, where survival, not prosperity, became the primary goal. It was a stark reminder that the path to success was not always a straight line, and that economic forces could shatter dreams overnight. Then came the boom. After World War II, America experienced unprecedented prosperity. A booming economy, the GI Bill, and the rise of the suburbs created a new version of the American dream: a stable job, a house with a white picket fence, a car in the driveway, and a secure future for your children. For a generation of predominantly white Americans, this dream felt incredibly real and attainable. It became the golden age, the standard against which we still measure success. However, this prosperity wasn't shared equally. While some were buying homes in the suburbs, others were fighting for basic human rights. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s exposed the deep hypocrisy at the heart of the American dream. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. fought to extend that promise to African Americans and other marginalized groups who had been systematically excluded. Their struggle was not just for economic opportunity, but for dignity, equality, and a seat at the table. This era forced a profound re-evaluation of who the dream was really for. So where does that leave us today? We live in an age of staggering innovation, yet also widening inequality. For some, the dream is about becoming a tech billionaire or a social media star. For others, it's simply about affording healthcare, paying off student debt, or owning a home in a market that feels impossible. The goalposts have shifted. Is the American dream still about upward mobility, or has it become more about just staying afloat? The American dream has never been one single thing. It's a constantly evolving conversation. It's been a powerful motivator and, at times, a painful illusion. A period of dramatic change that has completely reshaped the nation and the world. Our story begins in 1991. Picture this. The Berlin Wall had just fallen, and the Soviet Union, America's Cold War rival for nearly half a century, was dissolving. For a moment, it felt like the dawn of a new, more peaceful era. America stood as the world's sole superpower, and the future seemed bright, defined by a sense of victory and unparalleled global influence. This was the so-called end of history, a new world order with America at its helm. But as the political world was shifting, another revolution was quietly brewing in garages and university labs. The Internet. What started as a niche tool for academics and the military exploded into the mainstream. Suddenly, the world was connected like never before. This digital gold rush gave rise to the tech giants we know today, companies like Google, Amazon, and Apple. They didn't just change the economy. They fundamentally altered how we communicate, work, shop, and even think. The dot-com boom and bust was just the first chapter in a story of technological disruption that continues to accelerate. Then came the morning of September 11, 2001. Those shocking images of planes hitting the Twin Towers are seared into our collective memory. The attacks shattered America's sense of security and plunged the nation into the war on terror. This new kind of conflict, fought against a stateless enemy, led to long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. It also reshaped life at home with heightened security, debates over civil liberties, and a new government department, Homeland Security. The post-9/11 era was one of fear, patriotism, and profound uncertainty. Just as the nation was grappling with the consequences of war, another crisis struck, this time on the home front, the 2008 financial crisis. Triggered by a collapse in the housing market, a wave of foreclosures and bank failures sent the global economy into a tailspin. It was the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. For millions of Americans, the dream of homeownership turned into a nightmare. The crisis exposed deep flaws in the financial system and left a lasting legacy of economic anxiety and mistrust in major institutions. This brings us to the America we live in today. The last decade has been defined by deepening political divides, where it often feels like we're living in two different countries. At the same time, powerful social movements have risen to challenge the status quo. Movements like Black Lives Matter and #MeToo have forced vital conversations about race, justice, and equality, demanding that America live up to its founding ideals. And now we stand on the cusp of yet another revolution, the age of artificial intelligence. AI is poised to change everything, from our jobs to our daily lives, in ways we're only just beginning to imagine. From the fall of the Soviet Union to the rise of AI, the story of modern America is one of constant, breathtaking change. It's a story of triumph and tragedy, unity and division, of challenges met and new ones emerging. It's a complex, ongoing narrative that we are all a part of. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think was the most impactful event of this period? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through recent history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content. See you next time.